Welcome to Landscape Photography World, the podcast for everyone passionate about landscape photography. I'm Grant Swinburne. I'll be your host on this show, talking to landscape photographers about their motivation, likes and dislikes. This week, Rachael Talibart joins me to talk about her work. Rachael is a professional seascape and coastal photographer. Her critically acclaimed photographs of the ocean and coast have been featured in the press all over the world. Rachael is represented by galleries in Europe and the USA. Her work is frequently exhibited and her limited edition prints are collected internationally. She's the author of 3 monographs, including Sirens and most recently Tides and Tempests, and she writes for photography magazines. Rachael grew up on the south coast of England. Her first career was as a solicitor in the City of London. During the city years, Rachael's friends and colleagues were used to seeing her return from trips with bags full of exposed film. The development sometimes cost more than the trip. In 2008, she converted to digital, and she says that is when the obsession really set in. In 2000, Rachael left her city career, and after obtaining 2 more degrees, she now works full-time on her photography. Much of her early childhood was spent at sea. This has left her with a lifelong fascination for the ocean in all its forms, but especially in stormy weather. Rachael travels widely for her photography, but retains a special fondness for the south of England, and many of her images are created there. For Rachael, nothing beats a day on an empty shore. The wilder the weather, the better, and this is reflected in her work. She owns F11 workshops, providing location and online photography training, and she leads international photography tours for ocean capture. An experienced teacher and lecturer, Rachael is particularly interested in the creative aspects of photography. We discuss the business of photography, how her creative style has changed, along with a lot more. I hope you enjoy the show. G'day, Rachael. Welcome to Landscape Photography World. How are you going?
I'm good, thanks. Thanks for inviting me on the show, Grant.
Absolute pleasure. You've been on my list for a little while and I've heard you on a number of other podcasts, so really excited to have you on and talk to you a little bit about your work. Rather than start traditionally with how you got started and all of that sort of thing, I thought, why don't you describe to me what it is that you do and a little bit about how you do it?
Sure. So I'm a full-time professional photographer and I specialise in the coast and the sea. So I have 2 companies. One is the portfolio company, which is the core of the business, that's selling limited edition fine art prints through galleries and image licensing. Of course, we will do that. And the other one is a workshops company, so leading workshops. And I also do workshops for ocean capture, which some people may have heard of as well. And that's the core of what I do, but I guess that's the boring stuff. More interesting, I spend as many days as I can, which isn't as many as I'd like, standing by the sea, preferably in really rough weather. I like storms, and trying to capture photographs of nature at its scariest.
Nice. Well, I'm going to ask you a little bit later about possible scary situations, but before that, why don't we talk a little bit about how you got started and what started this passion and motivates you to stand there in terrible conditions looking at waves and the worst that nature can bring?
Well, I grew up sailing. My dad was a very keen yachtsman, and we used to go away every weekend if the weather allowed, and all of the school holidays were spent at sea. And we would go away in the summer, we'd go away for a whole month and live on the boat. And there were I'm not a youngster, so this is before GPS and all of that.
Right.
So we would have long sea crossings where there was nothing to see but the horizon.
Right.
I was and remain quite a poor sailor. I get seasick all the time. And so for me, sailing was, they say, don't they, that after you've been at sea for a couple of days and been really sick, you'll be fine. Well, maybe other people are, but
not your experience.
Not my experience. So when Dad gave up long distance sailing when I was in my early teens, I was quite relieved. But I did, as I think was inevitable, form an attachment to the ocean, even though it made me feel really poorly. You're stuck, if you're a kid and you're sitting, you can't go down below because you feel sick. So you sit in the cockpit for a day practically straight, where you're sailing with nothing in sight, you've got nothing to do but look at the sea. So I used to spend a lot of time looking at the sea and, like all kids, amusing myself with my imagination. So sometimes the waves would look like mountains, sometimes they'd look like creatures. And that's really stuck in my head. And then the obsession with storms, I think, came from that too, because the sort of motion that makes you really sick for me in a small boat wasn't really rough seas. It's that sort of rolling, so the days when my dad thought, yes, this is a perfect day for a sail, were the worst days for me. But occasionally we got caught out in bad weather. And those days I didn't feel sick. I mean, that was more about bracing yourself in the cockpit as the waves came crashing over you. We were all, the whole family, there with our oilskins on, as we used to call them, the waterproof clothing, the hat, and just getting slapped around the face by spray. It doesn't make you feel sick. It's more than slightly terrifying, but also really exciting, really exhilarating.
Some sailors would call it bracing.
Yeah, bracing. That's a wonderfully British word for it, isn't it? It was bracing, chaps. A bracing day. And I used to love that. I used to find that thoroughly exciting. And I think that's just stuck in my head ever since.
Cool. What is it that you're chasing, I guess, in your photography? What is it that gets you out of bed and down by the sea, either first thing in the morning or late at night or whenever it is?
Yeah, I'm always chasing something that's quite hard to find, which is something a little bit different. It's kind of become unpopular to say that you look for difference in your work. And I recently listened to a couple of podcasts where the people being interviewed were quite forthright in their disapproval of other photographers who claim they're looking for difference. And I understand. I mean, it's really hard anyway. Can we really find difference now when everything's been done? But still, I'm looking for photographs that just give me that, when I look at them, I think, oh, that's a little bit different. That's interesting. That's unexpected. I'd like to surprise people a little bit, I guess, and show them things in a way that they might not have seen them if they've been there. So it doesn't have to be a storm, because I also do much calmer work. I do a lot of detail and abstract work too, and I enjoy that just as much. But it tends to be harder to enthuse other people about it because it's not gnarly, So I'm looking for anything like that. And the nice thing about that is that I don't need to be in particular locations. I just need the sea. And that's really liberating, because it means that, unlike a lot of landscape photographers, I don't have to charge about all over the world going to extreme places because everywhere else has been done. All I need is shore, and it could be anywhere, which is really nice.
Nice. Do you have goals in your work? Do you set yourself goals? And if so, how do you go about that? What's your thought process in terms of setting those goals, and what do you do to then construct, I guess, the project that meets those goals? Yeah,
I mean, sometimes there are goals. If I've thought of a project, if I've got an idea, then I am definitely hoping to make more photographs for that project. And I mean, one of the projects that I've done that is, complete more or less, there's one more thing to do, is called Sirens, and it's photographs of big storm waves named after mythology. And I got the idea for that before I actually captured any of the photographs that are now in that portfolio. I didn't just get the idea out of the blue. And I got it through working that location and making lots of other photographs there repeatedly over a whole winter. I do believe no one's going to get the brilliant idea, what to them seems a brilliant idea, sitting on their couch watching Game of Thrones, although, we all like
that happens, but pretty rare.
That happens. Mostly I get my ideas while I'm actually out making photos, even if I'm not making the photos that end up in that portfolio. So once I had the idea to photograph these isolated waves with mythological figures in mind, then I went out looking to make them, but I needed the right conditions. I got very lucky. We got a really super storm here about 2 weeks after that. So then I went down knowing exactly what I wanted. And because I knew the location really well, because I've been going there every week for a whole winter, sometimes twice a week, once I got there, it was actually a really nice sense of flow because I had already done the groundwork. I'd learned the location. I knew what weather worked there, how it would affect the location, where to be, and when to be there. And so I just had 6 of the best hours of my life, just lying on the beach, getting absolutely pummeled by the storm and photographing it and knowing that I was capturing the pictures that I pre-visualized. I mean, obviously not exactly, because waves are random, but
you can't predict what they're actually going to do.
No, but I had done everything it was possible to do, I think, to make myself ready for capturing whatever it was that the waves would do. And that was really exciting. But I by no means work like that all the time. Like everybody else, I'm quite often just, oh, wow, I actually have a day free for photography, which I don't have any more days free for it because it's my job than anybody else. And you'll know that. You know, we're super busy doing all the stuff that goes into running a business. And actually getting out with the camera just to make your own work isn't that easy. So if I do have a day for that, but I don't have a particular project in mind, I will try and be really open-minded. And I will inevitably I'll end up going to a beach I know really well because I've explored all the local beaches, and they're not that local for me anyway because I live near London. So it's not like I'm going somewhere new. I will just go down there and see what happens. And there's something nice about that too, isn't there? Surrendering to the chance.
Definitely, yeah. I quite often ask photographers who come on the show about whether they're a planner or a more spontaneous type of photographer. Where would you put yourself on that spectrum?
I'm ever so boring. I did a podcast with Alistair Ben, as you probably have heard it.
Yep.
And I think every time he asked me to pick one or the other, I was in the middle. But that is kind of who I am. Like everyone whitters on about being an introvert as if it's the only cool way to be a photographer. I'm not. I'm in the middle. Some of me's an extrovert, some of me's an introvert. I'm a balance of the two. And I think most people are actually. And so I like to be as balanced as I can with most things. So I'm just greedy. I want both. I want to plan and I want to be spontaneous.
The thing I find myself when I'm planning something, the plan changes, and that could be in the planning phase or in the execution phase, because you get there and the conditions aren't quite what you expected, or the conditions change while you're there, and you have to change the plan because things happen, you know. And,
I completely agree.
I think anyone that plans it right down to the very detail is probably not. I'm not saying they're taking boring photos, but they're probably, you know, photographing something that's not going to move.
Absolutely right. And I think, like the example I gave you of Sirens and that first storm, if when I had got to the beach, the conditions hadn't been right, I wouldn't have just said, oh, well, gone to the pub or gone home. You know, I would have actually just gone and done some work that those conditions suited. So it's really important, especially when you're busy and you haven't got a lot of time, to be super adaptable, I think.
Yeah. How important is it to have projects for you personally?
It suits the way my brain works. In fact, now if I capture a standalone photograph, even if it's awesome, I'm always just slightly grumpy that it doesn't fit in one of
doesn't quite fit into the concept that you've got.
Yeah. So I always have lots of projects on the go though. I can't. I think it would be super efficient, and I'd love to be like it if you could just say, right now, this year I'm working on project X, and just do that. That I'm sure would be a really, really efficient way to work. But I've learned over the years that just doesn't keep me excited. So I've got to have lots of projects on the go. And the nice thing about that is that there's more chance that the picture I made is going to fit one of my projects. So for me, I think my brain likes to have lots and lots of things going on at the same time. It works better for me and keeps me creative. And I mean, I give talks about workflow, and I think the best thing that I can possibly say when I give that talk is, this is the workflow that I've got from my brain that I've learned works to keep me motivated. It might not be right for someone else's brain. So you can cherry pick things from other people's workflows that suit you and build your own. I think that's quite important.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's something that I tell my workshop participants and clients, and they're sort of asking how to take better photos, is develop a workflow that fits the way that you want to take photos. Don't copy what I do. I can tell you what I do, but that might not suit what you want to do. And so it's really what I try to teach them is looking for things that are going to be of interest to them, and then use their creativity to actually. How important, I guess, for you in your workshops and so forth, is it to get that across to people?
It's everything. I've built the whole business around nurturing the personal vision of the client. I would consider a workshop a complete and utter failure if my clients all came away with pictures that look like mine. There will always be, I'm sure you've seen, there will always be some people who come on a workshop and that's all they want to do. I want to copy what you do. Yeah, exactly. And they will milk your brains, because I share freely. I don't think you can teach and hold back.
Oh, no, absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. I know some people do, but I have no idea how they do it. I can't. So I will share freely how to do it. And I do have some clients who go away and produce Sirens portfolios of their own or whatever. I don't often see them again, because they've just got what they wanted and they're done.
They've moved on,
they're gone to the next person who's got an idea they like, so they can copy them. But they're rare, and most of my clients come back, and they come back precisely because that's not their objective, because they want to have something far more rewarding, which is to create something of their own. And because I am all about that, I have people I mentor, and there is absolutely no way that I'm mentoring them to make my photos. The goal is to find what works for them, because they've got a different worldview than I have and a different life experience. And we want them to share that with us. That will be meaningful art.
Absolutely. In terms of the projects, you mentioned with Sirens that you've got that concept in mind before you've taken any photos. Are there any projects you're working on or have worked on that the opposite has been true, where you've sort of started to build a portfolio and then gone, okay, well, I think there's something here that I can actually pull together?
Yeah, they've definitely worked that way round too. At the moment, I'm working on a project. In fact, I haven't told anyone about this. There you go. Exclusive. Not that anyone cares. A project called Sea Change, which is much more abstract than Sirens. It's photographs of things that the sea has altered, that it's carved into art. So obvious things that are potential candidates for that are sand patterns, worn textures on sea defences, and some surprising things as well that I won't talk about yet. But that really is pulling together existing work and then continuing to make new work for the project. I'm really enjoying it. I've made a little, I can't find it now, so I can't wave it at you. And anyway, your listeners wouldn't see it, but I made a blurb book over the summer of the project as far as it had got. And when it arrived, I felt really excited about the project. It's quite a nice thing to do. I mean, it's not cheap blurb, but if you're just making one for yourself and you wait for the 40% off offer, it's not too bad. And And there's nothing like that for sort of opening a book you've made and seeing your pictures for re-energizing you to keep working on that project.
Absolutely, yeah. No, I do something very similar, and I absolutely love seeing my own work and other people's. But that creation of the physical form, I think, is sort of, for me anyway, it's very close to the pinnacle of photography. If it's not in that physical form, it's not quite there. The screen's okay, but it's just not finished as far as I'm concerned.
Well, I'm with you completely. I mean, I absolutely love printing, for example. You'll probably see behind me. And I print every new edit. If it's a picture that I think has got legs, is going to go somewhere, I print it and pin it to the wall. And it's not until I've done that it feels like a proper photograph.
Yep.
It's weird.
Yeah. No, I'm totally with you on that. I guess, what do you do when a project isn't working for you? I've certainly had projects where I've got to, part way through and gone, it's just not happening. It's just, it's not working. What do you do when that happens, and how do you deal with that? Do you reshape it, or do you, just throw it in the bin or leave it on the shelf until later and come back to it?
Usually the last one of those. So I'm very untidy in Lightroom in that I don't delete stuff. They're obvious, complete disasters. Like, you started a long exposure and then you got bored and changed your mind and you've got a black rectangle. Those can go, but the rest I keep. And because the photographer I am today I know for sure is not going to be the same as the photographer I'll be next year or the year after. And I might see potential in a picture that I today don't see potential in. In 2 years, I might actually see that picture very differently, or it might suit a different project or whatever. But yeah, I've got tons of projects that are half formed and the work is sitting in collections in Lightroom and it will sit there for a very long time. I'm not going to delete it. It just works for me to be that way. And I've got some pictures that now for me are really, really successful, that if I'd been tidy in Lightroom and deleted them because they weren't what I was looking for at the time, they would be gone and I would never have had the income. Let's be boring about this. This is a job. I would never have had the income from those pictures, and they've done really, really well for me. So I definitely think it's worth being a bit untidy and not going through and using the pick flags and the X flags and rejecting, deleting, for sure. But getting away from the mechanics of Lightroom, back to the core of your question, I have, and it's not something that's come easily to me, but I've taught myself over time to think of everything I do as a step towards the next thing. So even if the thing that I've done today hasn't actually worked out very well, maybe doing it was really important in my sort of journey to something that does work out.
Yep.
And I found that to be a really nice mindset. It just takes the pressure off. So if I've removed results from the pressure, if I'm no longer requiring everything I do to yield results, then I just enjoy what I'm doing so much more. I chill out about it, I relax. I'm much more willing to experiment, do crazy things that most people say I'm wasting your time.
Yeah.
Because I'm not immediately connecting this with the need for a result. Yeah. And it's not easy to get that mindset, especially if you've had a career, my first career as a lawyer in the City of London, where you don't waste time. Everything has to be efficient and yield results. So I've had to retrain my brain to think that way. But now I'm I wouldn't say I always manage it, but if I find myself putting on the pressure to get results, if I'm aware that I'm doing that, then I give myself a sound talking to and try and put that aside, because I think it's the enemy of creativity.
Yeah, I'm totally agree. The number of times where I've sort of sat back and thrown maybe not an entire portfolio in the bin, but again, like you, I don't delete anything. But just stopped doing it, or an individual image, for example, and just said, well, it's not doing what I want it to do. And some of that can be mood, some of that can be because I, didn't quite nail the technical aspects, and that could be either the post or the photographic technical aspects. And the thing that I do then is think, okay, stop, take a look at it and go, okay, well, that was a mistake. These are the things that I need to do and change to move on and grow. That growth mindset of saying, okay, well, each of these steps gets me to the next one is totally the right way of thinking about it, as far as I'm concerned.
We seem to think alike on a lot of things.
Yeah, it seems that way. When did the art side of things take over from the recording side of things? This is something that I ask pretty much everyone. There's the point where you start taking photos, and worst, they're snapshots, and sometimes you might nail a composition, sometimes you might nail all of the aspects, but at some point you go, okay, well, this is something that I'm reasonably good at. Now I want to turn it into art. When did that happen for you?
Yeah, that's a good question. You're asking questions I haven't been asked before. That's quite
good.
So well done. Yes, so like everybody, when I started photography as an amateur and eventually an enthusiast, I was recording what I saw. I actually, for a long time, the camera for me stood in for a travelling companion, which makes me sound like Billy No Mates. But, as a youngster, I was quite intrepid. Sometimes it makes me quite astonished how intrepid I was. And I remember, for example, when I was in my early 20s, I just qualified as a solicitor, and I was allowed to take unpaid leave. So I went off around the world with my backpack and my 35mm compact camera, and that was it. I was on my own. And now, if my daughter, who's about the same age as I was when I did that, if she said she wanted to do it, I'd be terrified. But, when you're young, you think you'll live forever, right?
That's it. You're bulletproof.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And, there is a nice thing, isn't there? When you see something amazing, if you're at all an extrovert, if there's any part of you that's got that, you will want to share it. You want to turn to your neighbour, your husband, your wife, your kids, your whoever, and say, wow, that's awesome. Look at that. Yep. And they will react. And of course, I was completely alone. So it seemed my camera fulfilled that role. It seemed that when I saw something that took my eye, if I took a photograph, it was more real somehow. I'd sort of acknowledged the reality of this amazing thing that I'd seen, and shared it with my camera, which sounds a bit pathetic. I didn't actually talk to my camera. That would be really weird.
Mind you, there's cameras you can talk to now.
I know. I'm not going there. Not yet, anyway. Never say never. But essentially, I was recording what I saw and sharing it with my camera in the process. I don't think there was much artistry, although I would never dismiss the artistry involved in simply composing a record shot well. I think there is a lot of artistry in that, and I'm quite careful not to dismiss the art in the record shot, because there can be a lot of skill and artistry there. Totally. But essentially, I was recording what I saw. The big turning point, the epiphany moment, came quite late in 2015. In fact, in April 2015. I even know the month. And I was in Venice, and I was doing a masterclass with a Canadian photographer called Michael Levin. Yep. I don't know if you've heard of him.
I have heard of him, yeah.
Yeah, he'd be a good person to have on your show, actually. Anyway, he was doing this masterclass, and his work is very minimal, long exposures. I guess you say he's in the Michael Kenner school, although he's like all the good photography artists, he's made it his own. He hasn't just copied Michael Kenner. He's very much done his own work. And there was a lot of classroom learning, but there was some time to go out and make photos as well. And I'm a bit of a Venice file. I've been to Venice a lot. So when we had photography time, I didn't necessarily feel like I needed to stay with the group. And that's pretty typical for me. I like people, but here comes the introvert bit, so both going on. I don't really like making my work in a crowd. I like to be on my own when I actually create photos.
Right.
So on the last morning we had fog, which was very exciting. As having been to Venice 7 times and never had fog, I was super excited to get it. And I went out and I went off, left the group, and I went off and found a quiet corner. And I made a photograph. It's just 5 posts, mooring posts, and there's some gulls in it and nothing much else. It was before sunrise and everything was really quiet. And there were no vaporettos, no gondoliers, no tourists, because it was too early and only nutters like us, photographers, would be out then. I was completely alone and I made this photograph. It's got loads of negative space in it. It's mostly negative space. And I called the photograph 5, just because there are 5 posts. And I don't reference Venice at all. There are no Venice landmarks. And the title doesn't reference Venice. And I realized that I was now making a photo that didn't record a recognizable place. There wasn't really a proper landscape photograph, because those are typically named after the place and they record a place. That it was instead my first conscious attempt to create a picture that expressed an emotion rather than a place. And the emotion for me was quite complicated, despite all that negative space. But essentially, because I was at the time making a big decision too, and I just made the decision in that moment, and I felt a great sense of peace and of calm and of relief, because it was a decision I'd been wrestling with and I'd made it. And that's what I tried to express in the photograph. And the big decision was, I won't go on and do a PhD in maritime literature, which is what I had been planning to do. I will instead, I'll leave that behind and I'll try and become a full-time professional photographer working in the art market, so selling prints through galleries. So the whole thing came together, and that was the moment that I started to try to make more artistic. Oh, it's so hard to say that. It just is going to put people's backs up. But I don't want to do that.
I don't worry about that.
I'm gonna make photos that are not about recording what I've seen, but about expressing something else.
Yeah. For me, I think that's the important thing is, and it's why I asked that question is, there has to be, I think, a conscious decision that you are going to change from that. Okay, here's a nice scene. I've taken that, and that can be very artistically done. Certainly not disparaging that as a style of photography in any way, shape, or form. It has its own nuances, but I think that decision where you sort of stop doing that recording and turn it into something that is expressing an emotion is that point of difference that starts to change the way that you actually think about photography. And I guess, my follow-on from that question before is, how did it change the way that you actually thought about it?
It changed it completely. It was a fundamental shift. And it was interesting because it is really great to go on these masterclasses if you can with people who are already well established where you want to be. Michael said some interesting things, because we had classroom time and he showed us how he processed his photographs. Now, his photographs are very clean, minimal. I've heard people use adjectives like pure when they talk about his work. And the other people in the group, a number of them, were very shocked to discover just how much Photoshop work went into them. And it was huge. And he was again, another teacher who doesn't hold back, which I really appreciate. He was very generous with his knowledge, and that was a tremendous plus for him. And he showed us from raw file how he, and in his case, heavily manipulated the pictures so that the final picture looks incredibly clean and pure. And of course, we are all used to seeing amazing photographs that have actually been really, really heavily manipulated, but it's been done so well that you don't notice.
Yeah.
The ones we all complain about, we say, oh, it's been photoshopped, that give all of that a bad name, are the ones where it's been done badly, right? So that we all notice that there's something wrong here. We might not know what it is, but it just feels artificial. Yeah. He did it really well. So his people and these other people were, I think, a little disappointed initially. And he said something, which is the whole point of this ramble. He said, why would you constrain your art by some sort of rule that you can't manipulate it?
Mm.
And I took that to heart. But because of what I'm photographing, because of the subject that I'm working with, and because I don't very often do super long exposures, I'm much more likely to work at the fast end of the shutter speeds. I've chosen not to do heavy manipulation. And I find creatively rewarding this space that I'm in. And that space is trying to create art that I think expresses an emotion without changing nature in my picture.
Yep.
So I want to work with what nature's offering me and try and inject my own vision into it. So it's hard to explain without an example. And the example we'll go back to, because we've talked about it already, is Sirens.
Yeah.
A lot of people do say to me, oh, well, you've CGI'd that. That's what I get quite a lot.
CGI, wow.
Yeah, not from photographers, but bear in mind that my work is always being exhibited, so I'm getting feedback from non-photographers more often than I am photographers, and they'll use words like CGI instead of Photoshop. And the reason they're saying that is because they've never seen waves looking like that. Because if you're out in a Category 10 storm and you're just watching it, what you're going to notice is the movement.
Yeah.
You're not going to be able, you won't freeze a wave at 1,000th of a second.
Mm.
With the camera, I can freeze a wave at 1,000th of a second.
Yeah, and you can freeze every droplet. Yeah.
Exactly. And then you see the shapes.
Mm.
But for me, it was part of that project that I wouldn't create the shapes myself, that they had to be there in the wave. And I'm not going to say that it would have been wrong for me to do it another way, but we're going back to having a workload that suits your brain. And for me, it really worked. I liked the idea of just sharing what was actually there, but no one else could see it.
Yeah. I was having an interesting conversation earlier this weekend, actually, with a number of other photographers. We were actually at a meetup and taking some shots and whatever, and sitting around the table having a cup of coffee afterwards. And a comment was made by one of the photographers that they don't like editing. And I kind of said, that's kind of like cutting off one of your arms when you want to hang wallpaper, because the editing and the photography itself, the in-field work, are two sides of the same coin. The example I actually used was back in the day, if you didn't have a darkroom, you sent your photos off to the chemist or wherever, and 2 weeks later you got a set of prints back, and you go through the prints and you go, yeah, no. Oh, there's one that I've put in an album, And I said, what you're basically saying is you're happy with that as the result, as opposed to where you've actually got your darkroom and you've got your computer, you've got your darkroom, Lightroom, whatever you want to call it, Photoshop, and you can basically control every aspect of the production of the final work. And if you're throwing away, and I get, part of that is a learning and the challenge of understanding the way the programs work and what each slider does and how that manipulates colour and contrast, et cetera. But I said, you've really got to actually take that by the bit and run with it, because if you don't, you're actually losing, as I said, one of your arms in where you want to hang your wallpaper. It's like you're kind of chopping off your options in a big way if you're not. And it wasn't that they didn't do editing; they just didn't like it and didn't enjoy doing it. And that to me is a bit anathema. I kind of enjoy doing it as much as I enjoy the field work, almost. I think the field work is far more interesting and far more invigorating, but I certainly see the importance of getting behind the computer and just working the image to get what I want.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I don't disagree with you at all. I absolutely, it annoys me. It's a pet peeve. When I go to a photography exhibition and I see a sign saying these images have not been photoshopped.
Yeah,
It may be true. They may have been lightroomed. But the whole thing is I know why people do it. It's because they hear the public say it's been CGI'd, and they're trying to see that off.
You've added something to the image that wasn't there originally.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But I think we do photographers a disservice when we allow ourselves to pander to that attitude. And absolutely. I mean, in fact, in your example from film, it's even worse than that, isn't it? Because the prints that come back, those are the JPEGs, right?
Yeah.
So if you're sitting looking at your raw file and it's not quite the same as the negative that came back with the prints, but it's a bit closer to that. I mean, that's just not going to cut that up and put it in your album, are you? So, I mean, I completely agree. If you don't develop, and I use the word develop because for me it's Lightroom and they use the word develop. If you don't develop your work in processing, then either you are shooting JPEGs, in which case you have let some nerds in California decide how your picture should look.
That's right.
That's ridiculous. Or you're not editing your raw file, in which case, my goodness, I mean, that's absurd. You know, your raw file is just data. It's, you know, even just letting it come into Lightroom, something had to be done to it.
That's exactly it. Yeah. So, there is a conversion process going on regardless of what you do. Yeah.
So why wouldn't you take control of that? And I love that. I love that about digital. I'd much rather sit at my computer screen with a glass of wine than be in the in the dark room, the wet dark room, for sure. But I would also say that I, like you, much prefer being outside with the camera. And because that's my happy place, that's where I'm going to be most creative. It's inevitable. So I've adopted, again, my own workflow for me. I've adopted a workflow where as much as possible is achieved when I click the shutter, and as little as possible has to be done back at the computer. And that keeps me motivated and energized because it suits, that's my happy place on the beach. But of course, every picture has to be developed. And, you know, if I'm thinking about my portfolio, not just what's on my website, but the larger portfolio, I think there might be I think there might be 4 photographs in there that involve 2 exposures where I've brought together elements from 2 different photographs.
Sure.
Now, I might be wrong, it might be 5, it might be 3, but you know, you've got the idea. So it shows you how rarely I do that, which means that I don't have to go into Photoshop very often at all. And I can do it all in Lightroom, and that's a really nice streamlined workflow. And I print from Lightroom, so it's all quite efficient. And although I slightly tongue-in-cheek say this to people when they ask, it's not entirely untrue, that I probably don't spend more than 10 minutes editing any particular photograph. But it's not because that's right, it's just because I've adopted a workflow that suits my brain. And I work with another photographer who does a lot of the classroom workshops with me for my clients, including the developing workshops and the printing workshops. And he loves working on his computer, and it makes him energized, and he is super creative in Lightroom and in Photoshop with his work, and he's always finding out new things that he can do, and they infuse him, and that's great. That works for his brain. So yeah, I'm being very accepting, but you know, there we go.
No, that's great. I guess in terms of that feeling that you're trying to convey, what is it that you are trying to communicate to people? Obviously, a lot of your images are very impactful and your style is sort of developed that way. Is is it that impact that you're trying to get across, or is it something more subtle?
Yeah, I mean, I think am known for photographing impactful things like giant storm waves. And not just impactful artistically. If you've got one of their waves,
if you get hit by one, you'll know it. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And so those, in a way, those pictures are always going to have impact because the subject is impactful. But I do equally enjoy the little details that may not be instantly impactful. I mean, certainly on social media, they get far less attention. People are not going to go, wow, awesome, because they're not that sort of picture. And I enjoy doing those just as much. And now possibly even more because Sirens is pretty well done and I've moved on. So at the moment, I seem to be completely obsessed with the nuances of light on wet sand. And, that's shooting with my 24 to 70 millimeter low, fairly low setting on the tripod, pointing down at my feet. Sometimes literally my feet. They do insist on getting in the picture sometimes, but most of the time not. And I've just noticed how sand catches the light at the beginning and end of the day, and how seawater interacts with that, and the foam at the edge of a wave with a slow shutter, how it moves across the sand. And those are really quite abstract, though not fully abstract, because I think anyone who's ever looked at down when they're on the beach will know what I'm photographing.
Yeah, they'll recognise it.
Yeah. And I absolutely love doing that, and that has become quite therapeutic. I mean, without getting into, we shouldn't get into politics, but this country's in a complete mess, and it has been for about.
I don't think you're on your own.
No, and it's quite hard. And someone did a DNA test. I got a DNA test for Christmas one year, and the results came back and said I'm 97% London. Now I don't know how they know London. That's amazing, but
how they define it, yeah.
No, I'm clearly English to the core, and it is quite tough to see your country going ever more rapidly downhill. So, quite apart from any personal issues that we all have in our lives, there's that. And I have found doing this sort of photography where I just set the camera on the tripod, point it down, and just potter along the beach, waiting for a wave to do something gentle and peaceful and beautiful on the sand. It's really therapeutic.
Yeah.
And so I'm hoping that those pictures express that sense of peace and escape from all of this going on around us, and just this little thing at our feet is actually profoundly beautiful if we take the time to notice it. And I hope that those pictures will express that.
Right. In terms of your style, you've obviously got a very distinct style, and that's developed over a few years. How much do you feel that it's still developing, and are you very conscious of changes in your style through the period that you've been putting out work?
Yeah, it's changing all the time. I hope it never stops changing, because I think if I become set in something, then that's the time to stop doing this and move on.
Definitely, yeah.
No, it's changing all the time. But the nice thing is that what I've learned again is, and I'm sure that you will have the same experience, is that at some point you realise that you can make work for yourself that isn't necessarily going to be published and sold. And that work is very valuable. It might not be financially valuable, but creatively it's hugely valuable. And you should make as much time for that as you do for the work that you know is going to be commercial. And sometimes when you're, as I do, you're fully professional, fully earning your living from your photography, sometimes it is hard to persuade yourself. You might think that you should always prioritize the work that's going to sell.
Yeah.
But I think there's creative death on that path, because you'll just become stuck in a groove and you'll always...
Well, you might as well pack your portfolio up and just say, here, this is it. That's all I've got to sell.
Exactly. So for me, I have, again, it's quite a sort of mechanical thing. You sort of say, right now, Rachel, listen to yourself. You have to go and do that other thing that you fancy doing. It's just as important, even though most people will think she's lost it. So you might not publish it. And I think it's that inner critic. I try and encourage my clients to do this too. I think that your inner critic is valuable, but not at the time of creation. Yep. Don't let that inner critic be in on the act of creation. The inner critic, I think, should be listened to when it's, shall I publish this or not? But not when it's, should I take this or not? And for me, that's quite important, to sort of postpone that critical sieving of my work to a much later stage.
Yeah, I think that's a very valuable skill for people to learn, is the ability to, do that critical analysis at the end as opposed to at the beginning or during the creation process. Yeah, absolutely right. Totally agree. Yeah. How do you define success in your photography? And it might be commercial success, but I'm more interested in the creative, because the commercial stuff,
Yeah, absolutely. So if we park the need to earn my living from this bit somewhere and just talk about the creative, which is infinitely more interesting. And I would just say that if it was all about earning my living, I'd still be a lawyer. Let me just tell you, they make way more money.
It was entering my mind to ask the question, how are you dealing with the differential in income?
I'll come back to that. But yeah, I've almost forgotten your question, but I think it's there. You asked me about success.
Yeah, how do you define success? Yeah,
success for me is continuing to feel fulfilled by what I'm creating, and you can lose sight of that. You can't expect to feel fulfilled and successful all the time. Wouldn't it be lovely? But
it'd be marvelous. Yeah,
it would be, wouldn't it? But I mean, who does? God.
But honestly, if you felt that way, you probably wouldn't go out and take as many photos, and you.
Yeah, maybe. No, I had a lovely 6 weeks this summer. So doing workshops and doing all the other things, I'm super busy. And as discussed earlier, it's hard to find time for my own creativity. But I had 6 weeks this summer. Don't do workshops in the summer because the beaches here in England are way too crowded. And anyway, it was horrible plain blue skies and harsh light. And, so I just don't do workshops in the summer. And I had these 6 weeks where I was based at home out of my studio. And I was just enjoying the photographs that I'd made in the previous several months and looking through them and starting to develop them and print them.
Yep.
Given that I've told you my happy place is on the beach making photos, that sounds contradictory. And I said to my husband only yesterday, I said, do you know what? Those 6 weeks that we had in the summer where we didn't go anywhere, we were just at home, and I spent the whole time in my studio in this lovely creative little world, were some of the nicest weeks we've had in a long time. I really, really enjoyed it. And that was success. That was 6 weeks of pure creative fulfillment. And that for me is a definition of success.
Yeah, no, that's great. Fantastic. Let's talk about the financial bits and the work side of things, the administrative side of things, if you like. How do you balance the administration and the running of the business side of things with your creative? You mentioned earlier that it's harder to find time for your own projects or your own personal work. So how do you do that, and what techniques have you put in place to help you do that?
Yeah, I wish I could say I do it well. I don't. It's a work in progress. Both businesses have become staggeringly successful when I apply the standard is what I expected, and compared with what I expected, they have been staggeringly successful. And it is a more than full-time job to run two companies that are both hugely busy on your own. And I keep trying to find remote PAs and things, but there's not enough repeatable stuff for us to work. Yeah.
So, automation only works when it's repeatable.
Exactly, and it just isn't. So I'm not good at this, but one of the things that has helped, and I'm trying, and I continue to try to be rigorous about this, is diarising days for me to go and make photos and treating them like a meeting. So, if I put a meeting in my diary, or I'm doing a webinar or whatever it is, the photography equivalent of a meeting or a workshop, obviously I have to stick to that. That's a promise from me to my clients, and they're expecting me to show up. So I try to treat my diary, and I try to put in my diary photography days for me that I then treat like a workshop. So there's no way I'm not going, and then the important thing is the weather. So if on the day the weather is appalling, well, if it was a workshop, I'd still go. And I'd have to get creative to enthuse the clients. And honestly, you're probably going to agree with this as well, because we agree on a lot. It's the days when the light's bad on a workshop that clients learn the most.
Absolutely.
Because they have to work. When it's a spectacular light, it's like low-hanging fruit.
You go out and there's a beautiful sunrise. It's open the shutter for the length of time you want.
Everyone's
there it is.
Just like, oh wow, there it is. But when it's dreadful light, then everyone's listening to you for their creative.
Right.
So going back, I would obviously always go on the workshop. So I need to apply that same sort of rigor to my own time, and always go, even though the forecast is terrible. And another thing I do, which is a wrinkle specifically for my genre, is because I'm a seascape photographer, I go through the tide table for the year, and when there's a super big tide, I put it in my diary.
Right.
And I try to some of those days I have to use for workshops because they're in locations where I know we need a super big tide. But I'll try to make sure that I've cleared a few big tide days for myself, and then absolutely honour that and go down to the coast. It's a way of respecting my own work and my own creativity to give it that status in the priority list, if you like. No, that's great. Again, I was talking to somebody about this very thing, about that. When you've got a workshop or you've got clients and you've got an activity that you're doing with them, you've made an obligation with them to do that. And I said it's really important to make that same level of obligation on yourself for your own personal growth and what it is that you want to do. Because if you don't, then that'll slide, and that, as you say, ends up in creative death. Yeah, absolutely right. And the other thing I'm trying to learn, and this isn't photography related, but still, is make more time for friends. Because I think when you work for yourself, it's far too easy to end up working, as I do, 60-hour weeks or more. Because you work for yourself, you don't want to say no to anything unless it's bad for you. You're always going to be working, and it's too easy to lose touch with non-photography friends or even photography friends because you've never got time for them. And that's still a work in progress for me, but I'm trying consciously to readjust that way as well.
Yeah, absolutely. In terms of marketing your personal brand, what do you think are the most important aspects of putting yourself out there for people that are thinking about starting their own business?
Well, I think, first of all, if it's advice for people thinking of starting their own business, I should just say that I didn't go, one day I'm a lawyer earning salary, now I'm a full-time photographer. There was a big gap in between where I started to do photography as semi-professional. So there was that epiphany moment where I said, right, I'm going to try and be full-time. But it wasn't like I had no income from photography up till then. I was already what people would now call semi-professional. And I think if you can do it gradually, that's absolutely the best option. I have one friend who is a very capable photographer, but also has a very successful career in the City of London.
Mm.
And this friend decided a few years ago to give up her career and become a full-time professional. And this was almost from starting from scratch. She makes great photos, but she hadn't been earning any money from them. She wasn't selling them. And she gave up her work for a year, and then a year later she's back in the city because it's too hard. She's trying again now, and I hope it will be a more success for her now, but it's just too hard. So let it build up gradually. I did quite a lot of pro bono work until I realized it was wrong for other reasons, because you're taking money out of the pockets of other photographers. But I did do some charity pro bono work, which I would still advocate. And that allowed me to build up experience. And the more experience you can get, the better. And then not to be too snobby about the things that you'll do at the start. So I did some pretty low-brow exhibitions to start with, but that means you can build up a list of exhibitions on your website. And you start to look like someone who knows what they're doing. And be a bit humble. Don't be too proud to do work that initially you might think, oh, that gallery's no big deal. They don't really have much of a following, or they're a bit new. Just say yes, as long as they're not as long as they're professional in the way they project themselves, then they might just turn out to be really successful. And so I tried to be quite modest, not be too arrogant about it, and that I think really helps. And then the other big thing, I suppose, is just use the app. And this might seem obvious, but it isn't always when you're scrambling to make a career. I try very hard to have the highest level of integrity I can in dealing with everybody. So, for example, on the very basic level, I reply to almost every comment I get on social media. If it's just a thumbs up, then I send a smiley back, But if there's words, I use the words thank you, and then if I can decipher it, the name of the person who's commented. Sometimes they've got weird handles and you just thank you, smiley. If they've asked a question, then with one exception, which I'll come back to, I'll reply. And I'm quite generous with my time in that respect. And I think it's exhausting because I get a lot of comments. It's a lot of work. I can't automate that because I'm not just sending a standard reply. But I just think it shows respect. If somebody said to you to your face, that's an amazing photograph, Grant, I don't think, Grant, having met you, that you would just turn away and walk away.
No,
you wouldn't
probably
say
not.
Thank you. You would say thank you very much. And so I just think being polite and being respectful with everybody that I deal with really helps, which probably isn't where you thought this answer was going to go, but
no. I'm always fascinated by how people answer that, in terms of where they place themselves in terms of their personal brands. And I've experienced photographers where you do comment, and I get, if you've got thousands of comments on Instagram or wherever, it's almost impossible to respond to all of them. And there must be a point where you kind of go, oh, well, I'm going to have to cut back at the very least. But
I don't know. I mean, I do have 80,000 followers on Instagram and I still manage it. But these days, you get far fewer comments because Instagram hates us, right?
That's exactly right. Yeah. far fewer of those 80,000 are actually seeing any of your work.
I would just say, because I didn't get there. I sort of hinted that there were certain comments that I won't reply to.
Sure.
I absolutely won't reply to the comment where ? Or they might actually say Iceland ? If you can't even say I really like your photo, is it Iceland? If you just put Iceland ? That's just rude. So I don't reply to rude people. Or the one I got yesterday, I think someone their only comment was shutter speed ? Well, they can push off, I'm sorry, that's just rude.
I've had the settings ? It's kind of like, well, And I have responded to a couple of those and basically saying, well, it's largely irrelevant because of the way I shoot and the way I process.
Yeah. But also, I just think be polite. If
That's
someone
right.
says to me, "Oh, I love this photograph. It's an amazing effect. I'd really like to know what shutter speed I should start at." I'm gonna tell them.
Yeah,
There's
totally.
nothing to hide. But that's a respectful way of asking, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the thing is if you're being treated with respect, treat the other person with respect too.
Yeah, agree.
One of the things I like to explore a little bit is the nexus between place, technique, and I guess the creative process. And and what I'm trying to drive at there is, does the way that you shoot influence where you go, or does where you shoot influence how you shoot?
Oh, interesting. So it's much less about location for me
Mm-hmm.
than it is for a lot of people, I think, because quite often there are no landmarks, there are no physical things in my field of view. I am
You
just
could go
pointing
to any
out.
sea in the world, basically, or any beach, pretty much. Yeah.
But I think the tides are so important for me.
Mm.
And again, I heard another photographer who I won't name, whose work I massively respect, on a podcast very recently, where she dismissed quite clearly those of us who allow things like tides to influence us. I think that's okay. Everyone is allowed their own point of view, but I don't really think there's any other way that I can work. I have to know what the tide's doing. And then on my, bear in mind, we've already talked about my diarising photography days. If it's a big tide day, then I've got certain places I know will be interesting on a big tide day. So
Yep.
location has become a factor at that point. I know other beaches that I would much prefer on a shallow tide day, on a neap tide
Yeah,
day.
right.
So there is something in there. There is some practical limitation to the pure creativity.
Mm.
And so it would be completely wrong of me to say that location isn't relevant at all. But what I don't do is think to myself, well, I'd like to go to, I don't know, I'll mention a famous one in the UK. We've got an arch called Durdle Door, which you may know of in Dorset.
I've shot it once
Yeah,
during the middle of the day
yeah.
because
So
that was when
I'm
I
never
was
going,
there.
yeah, because you're visiting. Yeah, of course you would. And I would if I was there just, hiking or something.
I slapped a 10 stop on and did about a 10 and a 6. So I did about a 7 or 8 minute exposure. So all of the people swimming and everything just got removed pretty much. So.
Well, that's cool. That is cool. So it's a great spot, but what
Mm.
I'm not ever going to do for my workflow is think, oh, today I'd like to go and photograph the arch at Durdle Door. No. And if I did go to Durdle Door on that beach, it's very, very likely that I would be just photographing the sea.
Yep.
So it's quite nice not to be tied to location.
Mm.
But as I said, I can't rule it out completely.
Sure.
And for me, it's really, really important to go back to places repeatedly.
Mm.
So that's what works. Again, the right workflow for my brain is that I tend to find if I'm somewhere for the first time, that I have to say to myself, you'll be back, before
Yep.
I can relax and start to make what I consider meaningful work.
Mm.
If I'm thinking this is the only time I'll ever be here, I'm probably going to end up copying some work I've seen online by someone else, because I'm never going back. I'm going to want to get the iconic shot. So even if I might not go back, I always say to myself, yeah, you'll be back, chill out. And then I'm going to be happy to do something a little bit more quirky while I'm there and not worry if I miss the big vista.
On going back, are there any favourite locations that just keep drawing you back, and why are they your favourites? What is it that makes you keep going back time after time?
Yeah, I've got a handful of absolute favourites. So my nearest beaches have to be right up there at the top of that list because I can go to them more often than I can go anywhere else because they're nearer. So you probably know, because I know you know Britain quite well, Burling Gap in East Sussex. Mm-hmm. So you've got the Seven Sisters, but that's an interesting beach. It's tiny.
Yeah. There's not much in the way of shingle there.
No, so you've got the sort of black or dark grey stones, large stones, and then you've got at low tide, but only if it's a big low tide, you've got a little bit of sand. But the average hotel's footprint is probably bigger than the area of sand that you get revealed at Burling Gap at low tide. But something about that beach just sings to me. I think the light's quite special because it's bounded by all these white cliffs, chalk cliffs, so they're bouncing the light back. And then you get a lot of chalk sediment in the water, which also bounces the light around. So I like the light there very much. New Haven is also in East Sussex. That's where I photographed all of my Sirens because it gets some pretty nice waves when it's stormy. And it's the closest beach to me. It's about an hour and a half for that sort of thing. But then going further afield, I am in love with the Outer Hebrides in Scotland. Very special light there, completely different from the light in Sussex. And I go there usually for a week, once a year. Been doing that for a long time now. I love Portugal, the coast north of Lisbon, the Silver Coast as it's called. And in fact, the most famous spot there, which anyone from Australia would have heard of because you guys all love waves, is Nazaré.
Yeah, Nazaré, yeah.
Biggest waves in the world, they claim, although I gather it's disputed. But they are amazing waves, and I have been going there for a while now. And in fact, my husband and I love it so much that we're building a house 20 minutes south of Nazaré.
Okay.
So that's
the plan to retire there?
I don't know. We'll see.
Not yet.
Not yet. I'm not quite there yet.
Fair enough.
I love Iceland. I've become the Iceland specialist at ocean capture. So really like Iceland. I've just come back from a month in Iceland. And that was really special.
Yeah.
And I love Oregon. Have you been to Oregon?
I have not yet. It's one of those bucket lists that's still outstanding. So's Iceland. And surprisingly, so's the South Island in New Zealand for me. I still haven't.
Have you not been?
I've been to the North Island 4 or 5 times, but never to the South Island.
Oh, I've beaten you there. I've been. That was a long time ago when I was doing that solo backpacking trip. I went there.
Oh, yeah.
So Oregon is very special. The Oregon coast is gorgeous, and because my daughter's based in the USA, we go out to see her, and then I go to Oregon. I've probably forgotten somewhere, but those are core places for me, and I just love going back over and over and over again.
What's the most memorable experience you've had in photography?
It's going to be Storm Imogen, and that's the first big storm when I had my idea for Sirens. It was the 8th of February 2016. See, I remember the date because I'm in that file and Lightroom quite often. And it was 6 hours of the most gnarly, exciting, hard, exhilarating, cold, sore, wet, amazing photography of my life. And then, I took 3,000 exposures in those 6 hours because this sort of photography is much more like sports or wildlife photography than it is.
Yeah, you're taking multiple shots of the same wave. Yeah.
So high speed continuous drive and fast shutter speed, and it was so gnarly that you just don't know what you've got in camera. But there were a couple of occasions I remember seeing through the lens something amazing and knowing that I clicked the shutter, which we've all had that experience, and it's fantastic, isn't it? It's just like,
absolutely.
And,
nothing better than that feeling. Oh, I've definitely nailed that one.
Yeah, it's just incredible. And I can remember there was a particular moment that has always stuck in my head. near the end, so maybe an hour before I left, all of those pictures were taken with my 70 to 200 lens. And I was shooting at the long end of that, lying on the beach. And there was this moment when I felt as if I was in the sea. I was in the waves. I was actually part of what I was photographing rather than apart from it, observing it. And that, other people call it flow or the zone or whatever.
Yeah.
But for me, that I've never forgotten that moment. I can put myself back in that moment in my head. And that was definitely the best moment I've ever had as a photographer so far.
Fantastic. What about your worst experience? What's the horror story? Everybody has one, at least one.
Yeah, I do. Okay, this is me doing everything I've said that I don't do. And it was at Nazaré. And it was, it's this whole thing about knowing a location. So I'm at risk. I'm putting myself in danger when I go somewhere for the first time. I don't want to, and I will try my best not to, because it's not clever to put yourself at risk. But inevitably, until you know the location, you are more at risk than once you know it.
Absolutely.
And the very first time I went to Nazaré, I went down instead of shooting from the cliff top, which is where I now shoot from, I wanted to do something different because I'd seen loads of pictures from the cliff top. So I went down onto the beach and I wanted to get a really low point of view. So with Sirens, I was lying down for those because I want them to stand proud of the horizon.
Yep.
So I was going to adopt the same policy there. And I carefully observed, it was a falling tide, and I carefully observed the beach for a long time and noticed how high the biggest waves were going and position myself out of reach. And then I lay down as flat as I could possibly get. And I was photographing waves breaking against the promontory further out to sea. And I was not paying attention to the waves between there and me. And a sneaker wave came up the beach and it went right over the top of me and many, many, many meters beyond me up the beach, and then pulled back as well, of course. Now, I was not in danger. Had I been standing up, it wouldn't have gone beyond my knees. And I've quite often been standing up to my knees in pulling back sneaker waves on tough beaches. And I know I can cope with that. I won't get pulled over. But I wasn't. I was lying flat as I could possibly get on the beach. And I swallowed half the wave. Breathed it in, swallowed it, was completely soaked right through to my skin. And unfortunately, despite the fact that I put my arm up straight away, my camera was completely inundated.
Yep.
Now, bear in mind, I've been looking forward to this trip for a long time. First trip to Nazaré, and I'd only just got there. And my camera was completely dead. There was water pouring out of every possible place water can pour out of from a camera. So it was winter, it was December. So although Portugal's pretty warm, it's still, once that happens to you, you're dead cold. So I was super, super cold. I was absolutely soaking. My camera was dead. And it was a bit of a walk back to the car. And it was acutely embarrassing and very, very humbling, using the proper word, using humbling in the proper sense of it. And lesson learned.
I think you described a few things there that I'm very familiar with, being a bit of a seascaper myself, and that practice of reading the beach before you set foot on it, so find a nice safe vantage point and have a good look around before you get out there. And I mean, the safety aspect of this, can't be overstressed, in my opinion. You've really got to make sure that, you've got the right gear, you're going somewhere that you understand. And as you said, if you're going to somewhere for the first time, it's not much good turning up there at 3-4 o'clock in the morning and, it's pitch dark and you can't see what's going on.
Yeah.
What has the practice of photography taught you about nature?
It's taught me to respect it.
Mm.
I think I already did, but actually, I was just chatting about this with someone else yesterday. I am increasingly saddened by the attitude of some photographers who, in every other respect, I like and admire, but they have this. Everything about them suggests that they see nature purely as a resource for them to exploit.
Yep.
They go out and they're just there to get their photos, and there is nothing more to it. And I think we have a duty as people who are, after all, being given so much by nature, to not look at it merely as a resource for our exploitation. So, I mean, just on a very simple level, I will always try, when I've been on a shoot on a beach, when I leave the beach, to take away not only my own stuff, which is obvious, but also to, as I'm walking back to the car, I'm going to pick up as much as I can carry of sea plastic that I found on the beach and just dispose of it as responsibly as I can.
I've got a bag that I carry around specifically for that. Yeah.
And it's not even like we've had to inconvenience ourselves, is it?
No.
You know, we're just walking back to the car and we just pick up whatever we can.
You just bend down, pick it up, put it in the bag.
Yeah,
it's not hard.
Exactly. But it's amazing how often I'm on a beach with other photographers.
Yeah.
And they see me doing that and they never pick anything up and put it in the bag themselves.
Yeah.
And I just don't understand that. So for me, that's become standard practice. And you know what it really does as well is it gives back to us too, because it makes you feel good.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
You know, feel super stressed about climate change and all that's going on. But it makes me feel good if I've picked up some plastic. And it might not make me feel good for very long, but that feeling good is pretty worthwhile.
Does the job.
Yeah. And when I leave my workshops in Iceland, for example, I mean, the first thing that, and this is probably going to put people off booking, but so what? The first thing that I do is I explain to them about the fragility of the Icelandic landscape, particularly because I've just done 2 weeks in the interior with people. We've gone to really remote places where we didn't see any other human all day. About not standing on the moss, because it takes 70 plus years for that moss to grow. It might not look like anything, but it's had to work really hard to get its foothold. And we don't need to step on it. You know, and other things like that. I'm not perfect. I got on an aeroplane to fly to Iceland. I'm clearly not perfect.
Sure.
You know, we're all, just by breathing, we're all contributing to the problem. But there are things we can do. And I read a book recently that's about dealing with climate change anxiety, which I have loads of. And it said we don't need a few people to be perfect. We just need everyone to try to do what they can. And that kind of resonated with me. So
yeah, I think that's a great message. Yeah. What do you do when you hit a creative wall and you run out of ideas or whatever it is that you're feeling at the time?
I just make more photos. They might be shite. Can I use that word on a podcast?
Yeah, no, I don't care.
Okay, you're Australian. So
it's my podcast. I don't.
Okay. Well, they might be shite, but making the photos is still fun. And I just try to be as much as I can be. And I don't want to suggest that I've got it all sorted and I'm perfect. I have just as much self-doubt and bad patches as anybody else. But that's why I know what I need to do, because I've been through it and continue to go through it. And it is to constantly remind myself to be experience-driven, not results-driven. It's kind of nice to come back full circle to where we started, I think, because it's awesome being beside the sea. It's wonderful. I doubt very many people have gone to their deathbed wishing they spent less time on the beach.
No,
so, go back down to the beach with the camera and make shite photos until I make one that's not shite.
I think that's a really good I guess practice to get into.
Yeah.
What do you see as being the biggest challenge facing photography right now?
That's a really good question. Photography generally, I can't say because I don't know enough about documentary photography and portraiture and stuff.
But I'm largely talking landscape photography, I guess.
Okay. The biggest challenge facing us is working out, reworking out our place within this whole difficult world that we're now in, and what are our responsibilities and what should we no longer do, and how are we going to balance that in a sort of conscientious way. I'll give you an example because I'm constantly worrying about this and renegotiating it with myself and constantly changing what I do. So this is going to alienate half your listeners now, but I gave up meat and fish, which is a sort of meat in my opinion. I gave that up a couple of years ago because it's one way of balancing my impact on the planet.
Sure.
Lots of people still eat meat. It's not my place for me to tell them off for that because that's their personal choice. It would be super counterproductive for me to do that. And anyway, they might have given up something else. They might no longer fly. I still fly. So, I've got a daughter who lives in the USA. I'm never going to see her. So someone's got to get on an aeroplane. I flew to Iceland for my workshops. So I'm not perfect. And while I was in Iceland on one of the workshops, which was organised by Ocean Capture, it included doors off helicopter flight. And there was an empty seat on the last flight. So I wouldn't normally have gone up because I was one of the leaders and I was teaching coastal work. I wasn't teaching aerial photography. But on the last flight, there was a spare seat. So it was going to fly empty or,
with somebody on it.
Or with me in that empty seat. So I said, thanks. And I went. And I didn't have my camera straps with me because I don't normally use camera straps. And I wasn't expecting to fly because this was for the clients and I wasn't expecting to go up. So I had to go to a little local shop, and the closest I could come to string was I found some Icelandic ribbon with the Icelandic flag on the ribbon. And I bought this and tied it to my camera, and my camera looked so silly that I did a little photograph and put it on Instagram in a story. And I said, this is what happens when you don't have a strap and you've got going on a helicopter flight. And somebody who shall remain nameless, but who I've now blocked, which is extreme for me because I hardly ever block anybody. Another professional photographer, sent me an extremely harsh direct message, telling me that I surely know better because of the carbon footprint of helicopter flights.
All right.
Now, that stung to an extent because, of course, I know he's right that a helicopter has quite a big carbon footprint.
Yep.
But I also think he was completely wrong to do that because I expect he eats beef twice a week, probably, like most people. Yep. I expect he does all sorts of other things that are very bad for the planet.
Does he drive a car?
Yeah. But I mean, maybe I'm doing something like not eating meat when he's eating meat. And sure. I'm not going to get into a debate about whether one helicopter flight when it was an empty seat is worse than eating beef twice a week. I don't know. I don't have those statistics. It might not be. Yeah, but I think we've got to find a way in photography when we're out there photographing these fragile places that are being impacted so badly by our actions to negotiate a position where we support other people who are making great choices.
Yep.
Where we don't alienate people because we don't approve of their particular recipe for dealing with the problem. And we don't virtue signal as if we're perfect and everyone else is beneath us. We've got to negotiate a fair and reasonable dialogue where we can help each other in a constructive, positive way. And I think that is the biggest thing facing landscape photography because of our subject. Our subject is the place that's perhaps showing the most our impact on it. And I don't have a solution. I'm no better than anybody else, but I'm trying.
Yeah, very, very very good to hear. What do you think is the future of landscape photography?
It could be quite bleak, couldn't it? It could be
Potentially.
quite bleak. Yeah. There's an
I mean,
awful lot
one
of
of the, sorry, go on.
Yeah, go on. No, you go, because
I
I'm
was
just.
going to say one of the things that has come up before, and what kind of worries me is that with climate change and the impacts, is that you end up with climate change porn being the stock in trade for landscapers. And what I mean by that is, the dramatic impacts, floods, fires, etc., become, the subject. And I don't have a problem with that per se, but if that's all it becomes, and it's really about the drama and the image is not sending the message, hey, we've actually got to do something about this. If it's about trying to gain likes or whatever, and it's really just, well, here's an image without any commentary on, look, this is shocking. Something needs to be done. Then that's a problem,
I agree. I think it's part of an even bigger potential problem in that I think there is a voice out there that suggests that a picture is worthless unless it has a worthy message.
Yeah.
And I think there's a danger with that as well. It overlaps massively with what you very rightly just suggested as a concern, that if we feel like our work must be about climate change because we're photographing nature, and that's the only worthy work, that we're going to have a very narrow field of landscape photography, that it'll become ever more narrow. I mean, it actually, art for art's sake is a debate that's been going for centuries.
Yep.
I studied
that'll never end.
Yeah, and it will never end. I think I do believe in art for art's sake.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think everything has to have a documentary worthy message.
Yep, I agree totally.
There is huge value in what art does. It communicates one human being's view on the world with another, and it allows that other person, the viewer, to interpret using their own worldview. It's an alchemy, really. It's the most amazing coming together of views and worldviews and personal views. And I think that should be enough on its own. And if we only photograph what's going wrong in nature as well, I think we give a false picture. It's like if I, random thought in my head. So let's go back a few decades. If I was a photographer and you said to me, right, you're commissioned now to go and photograph, do a documentary series on racial conflict in Brixton. Let's just pick something out of the air.
Yep.
Because I lived in Brixton when there was, that was an issue.
Sure.
That photographer's going to go out now and he's going to find all the pictures that he can of that, and he's not going to photograph the two guys who are best friends having a pint outside the pub who are of different races, because that's not part of his brief, right?
Yeah.
And he's going to give a false impression of what Brixton's really like, or was really like then. And it's the same with landscape photography. We can't just photograph what's bad, what's wrong. We can't ignore that. That would be wrong too. But I think we should also photograph what's still beautiful, what's still amazing, what's still magnificent, because it inspires and it gives hope and it inspires people. That's what we need to protect.
Totally agree. If you weren't a photographer, what would you be?
I'd be a writer. It was what I always wanted to be as a child. Okay. And I even wrote a novel. It's really bad. No one's going to see it. I'm not telling you what it's called.
Did it get published?
Yeah, no. I did get a short story published, but I knew the novel was so bad I never sent it off to anybody. It was sci-fi because I'm a geek. But I would probably have kept plugging away at that. Or I'd be an academic, English literature academic. That's probably more likely.
Okay, interesting. Are there any particular photographers that have caught your eye recently that you think I should be talking to?
It depends. Do you just do landscape? photographers?
it's landscape photography world, so it's all about landscape.
The clue is in the name.
But for me, that's a very broad definition. So seascape, landscape, cityscape, even street photography, I see to a certain degree, less so the people, the people watching aspect of street, but street and architecture sort of where it's examining the man-made landscape, I incorporate into that in my mind anyway. And it's my podcast, so I can make the rules up as I go along.
Okay. Well, I'll just bombard you with names then. No. Have you had my friend Simon Baxter on?
Not as yet, no.
He's a woodland photographer.
Yep.
And
I'm aware of his work. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. He and I actually did a workshop together a few years ago in Torridon.
Nice.
He's a nice guy, and I think he'd be a good person to have on. Have you had Sandra Bartosha?
No, she is on my list though. Yeah.
Yeah. Sandra and I just did a workshop in Iceland together with Hans Strand, Jonathan Critchley, and Ragnar Axelsson.
Nice.
So I had an opportunity to talk to Sandra a bit, and I think she would be a good person to have on the show. Her new book, I've got both her books. They're both excellent. Her new book is only recently out, and it's called, I think, Rhythm or Rhythms of Nature. And it's gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous, Grant. If you get a chance to see a copy, you should have a look.
Keep an eye out for it, yeah.
Yeah, it's really, really beautiful work. So she'd be a great person to have on. Have you had Hans on? Hans Strat?
No, not yet.
He's actually, he's super famous. He's a very nice guy, really approachable.
Cool.
And then if you want to have like total A-lister hero, then you could try approaching Ragnar Axelsson, who is like, photography god. In fact, I think so much of his work that despite the fact we were both leading a workshop together, we were there for a week with the others. I was too shy to speak to most of the time because I'm such a massive fan of his. His English is impeccable. He wouldn't have any difficulty at all with a podcast.
Fantastic. Thank you for that. I've got one more question for you, and for many of my listeners, it's the most important one I ask each guest. Do you like pineapple on pizza?
God, no. Yeah, no. No, just don't go there. Why would you do that to a pizza?
Some people like it, and I think it's important for us to get to the bottom of that.
Yeah, but I don't. It's my least favourite fruit. Full stop. Though.
Really?
So
okay.
It's too sweet. Wow. I'm more a savoury person than a sweet person.
Okay. Well, I'm a bit of a fence sitter on that. If it's on the pizza, I won't pick it off, but I won't order it. So.
Yeah, but it's normally with ham, isn't it? And I don't.
Yeah, ham, the old ham and pineapple, or what we call the Hawaiian. We also have the weird quirk of adding a egg and calling it an Aussie pizza. To the ham and pineapple pizza. Yeah, so you crack an egg on top, leave the yolk whole, and Okay, I'm not about that one.
No, not for me. I do like a jalapeno though.
Oh yeah, they're not too bad. They're not too bad. Well, it's been absolutely marvellous getting to know you, Rachael. Where can people find your work?
Oh, I'm ever so easy to find because it's just my name and there's no one else with it in the world. So as long as you spell the first name right, with 2 A's, Rachael, and then my surname is pretty phonetic, Talibart, then you'll find.
Fantastic. Thanks very much.
Oh, Grant, it's been really a real pleasure to chat to you. Thank you very much for having me on the show.
Cheers. Thanks again for listening to Landscape Photography World. I hope you enjoyed the show, and keep listening because I'll be joined by some great guests in upcoming episodes. You can find my work in this podcast at grantswinburnphotography.com. I'm also on Vero, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram and Facebook. I'm Grant Swinburne. Hope to see you out shooting soon.